We have a very special presentation to you, for you today. Dorothy's Dolls, being given by Elizabeth Babchuk, her lovely daughter. We're really excited to be here today. This is the first of many presentations that we'll be making of people that made a difference in Fort Hueneme. And with Dorothy recently passing away, we thought, you know, who would be better but Dorothy? She put a lot of effort into Fort Hueneme. She was a long-term resident here, and Helen Brandt, commissioner, member of the commission, will talk about that. But before we begin, I just wanted to introduce a few people here. We are joined this morning by Mayor John Sharkey is here. Former Mayor Tony Volante is also here. We have from the Oxnard Harbor District Commissioner Marianne Rooney is here. And from our commissioners, our board members who worked really hard on this, our historical commission, we have Larry Downing is here. And Miss Helen Brandt is also here she'll be speaking. We've been working really hard at trying to bring back to Fort Hueneme presentations that interest our residents and our visitors. And today we've got this beautiful doll collection. But I'd like to introduce Miss Helen Brandt, who'll tell you a little bit about Dorothy Ramirez and what contribution she made to Fort Hueneme.
I was figuring out the other day how long I've known Dorothy. I get choked up every time. More than 75 years.
Oh, wow.
A long time. Dorothy was born in July of 1915 and was a lifelong resident of Ventura County. Dorothy and her late husband, Leo Ramirez, owned a grocery store together for over 20 years. Bob and I owned a grocery store about that same time, and we used to borrow stuff from each other. Dorothy was very active in her community, belonging to many community organizations, including Mary Star of the Sea Catholic Church, the Rotary Club, the Elks Lodge, the Chamber of Commerce, the Navy League, Hueneme Beautiful, the Cultural Heritage Board, the Hueneme Museum, board member of the Friends of the Bard Mansion, and Native Daughters of the Golden West. She received many awards from the organizations that she so faithfully served. She was awarded the Citizen of the Year in Hueneme in 1972, the Chamber of Commerce President's Award in 1985 and 98, and 88, and in 1988. In 1998, received the award of the Woman of the Year of California. The rest of the answer, we want you to leave for your calls.
I had an opportunity to meet Dorothy later on in her life. I've been with the city for 21 years, gave me the opportunity to know a lot of people. But no one had as much spunk as Dorothy. Even in her older age, she had a lot of spunk. And I'm really blessed to meet a family member of hers. Actually, I've had the opportunity to meet now Auntie Isabella as well. But in my discussions with Betty, I can see she's got a lot of her mom's spunk. And so I'd like to introduce to you Betty Babchuk.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My family and I, and most of my family is here today, want to thank you very much for coming and attending the exhibit of Dorothy's Dolls. My mother would have loved this. And I also want to thank Carmen Nichols for making this possible. She came and got the dolls from my mother's house, and when she did, we looked forlorn as the dolls left the house. I want to thank the Fort Hueneme Historical Museum Commission. They were just wonderful in getting all the dolls into the cases and moving the cases and taking the time to hear about the dolls. We are very grateful and we are appreciative of this event. I am Elizabeth Babchuk, but I'm more commonly known as Betty in the city of Port Hueneme, because that's what my mother always called me. I was always Betty to my mom. She would have been really overjoyed at being able to show her dolls today. Anytime she had company, that was one of the first things she wanted to do, go into her back room and show her dolls. I often heard her saying to people, "You gotta come and see my dolls. They're waiting for you." Well, my mother, she was a very unique lady. Not just because she was my mother, she was unique. She loved her family. She loved her friends. And I can tell you, she especially loved Port Hueneme. I think we're fortunate today that my mother also liked dolls, and that is why we are here today. Well, that brings us to, what is a doll? We find that a doll is really an inanimate object made in the likeness of a person. So if it has some other kind of a head on it, it is really not a doll. Even the early civilizations had dolls. Egypt, Rome, and Greece, they had dolls. And fragments and parts of dolls have been found in excavations and caves and diggings. Many of these parts and dolls may have been playthings at one time, or they may have been just an object that they sat and looked at, or they could have been used in their religious rituals, and that was usually the case. Now, of all the dolls my mother had, I'm really correct in saying this, I believe. The Shirley Temple doll was her favorite doll. The story about this doll, though, is this doll was originally given to me. And when we got it, my mom said, "Oh, it's nice. Let's keep it perfect." She wrapped it in a little baby blanket. She put it back in the box. And she said, "You know what we're going to do with this doll? We're going to put it right up here in the closet." And she said, "Sometimes you can take it out and you can look at it." Okay. Well, that was my mom. Sometime later, actually, it was a few years later, my mother got these big doll cabinets put in her back room, big glass cabinets. And before I knew it, that doll was in her doll cabinet. But it really didn't matter. By this time, I had 2 boys, and believe me, they weren't interested in the Shirley Temple doll. Well, we find that this doll, Shirley Temple, and this is an original doll, had irresistible appeal. It sold from 1934 to 1938, 6 million dolls. Well, the people at that time were in a depression. They needed something. And Shirley Temple, became the darling of America. Why not? She could act, she could sing, she could dance. She had a mop of curls. She was precious. She was the darling of America. She was Grand Marshal of the Rose Parade in Pasadena 3 times, the only person with that distinction. The first was in 1939 at the 50th anniversary of the Rose Parade, and she was 10 years old. The second was in 1989, the 100th anniversary of the Rose Parade. and the last was in 1999, just before the turn of the century. Well, the person, Shirley Temple, went on. She went on in movies, she got married, she even got into politics. And getting into politics, she became ambassador to Ghana. And in later years, she became ambassador to Czechoslovakia. And so she left her mark. And she passed away about a year and a half to 2 years ago. And I see on Wikipedia now that her dolls are experiencing a revival. But now let's go to another doll. Well, this doll is an Aboriginal Australian rag doll. And it was sent to my mother in the year about 1943. In the entryway, there's a big gold picture there with two small children. Well, that's my Uncle John and my mother. And now my Uncle John is grown up. He's in the Second World War. He was always my mother's good pal. He sent her this from Australia. They were very close-knit family. As in the early years of my family, my Uncle John and my mother were the oldest in the family of 5 children. And their mother raised them all alone because there was a tragedy in the family. Her husband had been killed in the sugar beet factory in an explosion in a fire in Oxnard at that time. But they lived in a beautiful home because my grandmother's father and mother had it built for them. So on Saturdays, the 2 older children, Uncle John and my mom, always were very helpful. And this is true because my mother wrote it so many times. They always wanted to help their mother. She had all other children to take care of. And so on Saturdays they would go, which is now the CB base. And at that time there were 2 rows of eucalyptus trees that went all along before the Navy took them out. And they were so beautiful, my mother would tell me, that they kind of met at the top like a hollow. And so it was kind of like dark to go through there in your car. But at the bottom there of the eucalyptus were the mushrooms. And all the mushrooms were the kind you could eat. They were edible. So John and my mother, they would come and collect the mushrooms, put them into the baskets to take home. Now at that time, and it's really hard to believe, there was a trolley that went from Oxnard to the pier. And I've heard my mother talk about this many times, and I think it's kind of unbelievable. We don't even have a trolley here today, do we? But she said, oh, there was a trolley, and people would get on the trolley with all their picnic stuff and picnic baskets, umbrellas, and go out to the pier. There was also a popcorn stand and a hot dog stand. So they bought popcorn, and then they went back home. So that's sort of the reason my mother got this doll. This rag doll was very popular at that time in Australia, but it wasn't made in Australia, even though it's an Aboriginal doll. They were being made in Europe. Europe liked these dolls too. And then, of course, according to Wikipedia, later on, even China started making them. Well, we're going to go to another country now, Hong Kong. These dolls. My mom was my best girlfriend. She was a lot of people's best girlfriend, though. She was best girlfriend to my Auntie Isabel. She was a good girlfriend to Helen. She was the best girlfriend of several ladies in Fort Hueneme who are no longer with us. So one time, my best girlfriend and I, we went on a girls' shopping trip to Hong Kong. Since the people there put all their goods and all their wares and things they're gonna sell you right on the sidewalk. This is a paradise for shoppers. So Mom and I would go up and down the alleys and the streets, looking in all the baskets and boxes to see what we could find. We did find some little jewelry boxes, and we found a little small, cute little bird cage, and then we found these dolls. And they were in a basket, a big Chinese basket with all kinds of other rummage. Well, what a find. It looks like a whole family, and there's another one over there that belongs with them. We were thrilled with these dolls. And as you can see, the dolls are quite unique, and they're made of porcelain. Well, the next doll I have to talk to you about is this little Highlander doll. And this doll does have a dynamically cute little story. My husband is involved in this story. My mother traveled some with the women called the Merry Widows, and maybe some of you who are here today remember them. They were Alma Green, Lucille Beerworth. Lucille has a big case here with many of her things. And Madeline Keene. And another one of the Merry Widows was Auntie Isabel. Well, they were going on this big trip to Scotland and England, and they kept talking about it, and we liked it so much that my husband and I tagged along too. And as usual, it was rainy, and it was cold, and it was windy. And our motor coach was on the way to Loch Lomond. Here we're bundled up in all these clothes and sweaters and scarves, and my mother really wanted to see Loch Lomond, and the driver thought, well, we can just pass it. Nobody wants to get off the motor coach in this kind of a day. She says, oh no, she said, I didn't come all this way just not to see Loch Lomond. You stop this bus, you open that door, and I'm going out. No one else went out. It was wet, it was muddy, it was slippery. You could hardly see in front of you because of this downpour of rain that was like a monsoon. Finally, charging to the rescue was Walter. He said, you know, I've got to go after Dorothy. I'm worried about her. She could slip and fall. And he said when she got down there, she was going like this in the water, playing with the water, thinking, you know, the Loch Ness might come up or something. And he said, Dorothy, here, let me help you. And she said, I don't need any help. What do you think I am, old? Doesn't that sound just like my mom? On that trip, though, we kind of split up and did our shopping separately because he doesn't like to shop. But anyway, my auntie and mom went shopping, and they bought sweaters and these little berets. And my mother bought this little Royal Highlander doll. And you can see he's got the bagpipes in, little tiny bagpipes. Now we're going to go to this Russian nesting doll. And this doll, of course, you've seen these, they open up, and then all these little dolls come out. All those little ones you see in here come out of this doll. Well, we had a glorious time sailing up the Baltic. It was my husband, Walter, and my mother, and I. And we went to Finland and Norway and Denmark and Sweden and Estonia. And then the grand thing was to end up in St. Petersburg, Russia. We were on a ship called the Holland American, and as it sailed into the dock, it didn't come in to the dock straight away. It came adjacent to another ship, which means the only way we could get to the dock, we had to get out of our ship and go through that other ship. So they would put a blank, kind of like a gangplank or something there, so you could walk through the other ship to get to the dock. And we did. We were on the way to what we thought was about 98-degree weather. We got into the Hermitage, only to find our little Russian lady gave us a real scolding. She said, "Oh, you Americans, we are not called the Hermitage. What do you think? We're not French, we're Russians. If you want to say it in English, it's Hermitage. You have come to see the Hermitage. So beware now when you go there." Well, the Hermitage was, you could spend weeks there before you would see it all. And we were only there one day in the Hermitage. But we did get to see the Mona Lisa, and the Mona Lisa is very small, which we always thought it was a big painting, very small. We got to go to a ballet, and of course then, when we went back to our ship, we had to go through that other ship first to get to ours. Well, there must have been some entrepreneurs on that ship, because right away, before you got onto our ship, they had set up a Russian boutique. But that was great for Mom. She loved to shop. She stayed there at the Russian boutique, and that's where she got her nesting dolls. They're called Matryoshka. And we find that really the Russians send most of those dolls out for export, because they know that tourists will buy them and people in other countries. We're going on now to this doll. It's a doll with no features. It has no face, so to speak, on its head. And they make many of these dolls, even still today. All over Japan you will see these dolls, and some will be real little, like this big, and some will be huge. And they always make them in these very same colors. Well, I bought this in a village in Japan. It was way up in the mountains. It's called the Takayama Village. And this village is known because it's not only an ancient town, but at one time it had been the imperial city, home of the emperor. So they have museums there with all the old antique carriages and beautiful things that they had in the emperor's home. Well, these dolls were made by villager people, though. The people who couldn't go out and buy dolls and all, they made handmade them. And when they made them, they always gave them to their daughter when she got married. It was supposed to be like, "Oh, I'm giving you this gift to wish you, when you have a child, good health to you, safe delivery of this baby, and safe and health to the baby." One of the things about the doll is that they all have a bell that's in the front. And the bell is so that when the baby plays with the doll, it becomes like a rattle, and the mother knows where the baby is. Well, the last doll today I want to talk about is the Anne of Green Gables.
Oh.
It's this doll. Susan, you should have one of these dolls, because we brought you one just like this. This doll was created from a fictional character. My girlfriend almost cried when I was telling her about it. You know, Cheryl, this isn't a real life person at one time. This was a fictional character. She said, "Oh, don't tell me that. I just loved Anne of Green Gables." But Anne of Green Gables was written in 1908. It was Lucy Maud Montgomery. This lady had this vision of this doll or this person. And it was on the St. Edward's Island. St. Edward's Island is, you go up past Maine into Canada and the islands off of Canada. And she lived there, this Lucy Maud Montgomery. She came up with an idea of this little girl. this book became so famous. It became a classic. It was like any of our classic books that we see on the shelves in the library today. And not only did it become a classic for children, but then mothers and dads started to read it too. And then they made it into films. So today we can see films of Anne of Green Gables. And one of the things I want you to remember, though, is she was not a real person. This concludes my presentation for today. I am so appreciative that you came to see my mother's dolls. Thank you so much for coming, and I'd like you to look at the dolls, and I hope I'll see you soon again. Thank you.
That was wonderful. And I think something that we've learned by Betty telling stories about her mom is that no matter how much we've got going in our lives and how much work we have and how much distractions we have or commitments we have, Dorothy found a way, and you know, being the woman of the year, I'm sure took a lot of work. She dedicated herself to a lot of causes, but she found a way to balance that work life, that personal life too, and traveled. And if we can learn anything from her is to just learn to balance our lives and create our own stories for our family members and for our sons, daughters, and grandkids to tell about us. So thank you very much for taking time out of your very busy day to be here. We were going to have this display for at least 3 months here. We will hopefully, the Historical Commission will be working on our next presentation, and we'll hopefully present that in about January. But we're going to try to keep the dolls here as long as possible. I like to keep them here as long as we have room for them. But please come back and visit. Take your time today to look at some of the other dolls and some of our other displays. And again, thank you very much. I know your time is very valuable. We really appreciate your visit here today. Thank you.
Carmen?
Would you like to announce that?
No, yeah, just the entire presentation today will be available on kadytv.com tomorrow morning. Okay, so anybody wants to watch it and tell people, it really was a wonderful presentation.